So, I just watched Arcane Season 2, and I must say, what a great show. But before you watch the review, if you haven't seen Arcane Season 1 or 2 yet, I would definitely recommend doing it. I don't think it's perfect, there are definitely characters and plot points in it that I don't think are as interesting, but it's one of those shows where the good things are really good. It made a lot of bold choices and it definitely evoked a lot of emotion out of me. So if you're interested in watching it and haven't done so yet, I would definitely recommend doing so without having it spoiled first, because I'll be spoiling it now. At least watch the first 3 episodes. They on their own are a masterpiece in my opinion. I've never played League of Legends because I have a life. But I feel that's the best way to experience this show because the character deaths are more unpredictable.
League of Legends characters are the only ones that are unkillable in the show.
I agree with Penguin Zero here, which is why I'm glad I've never played the game nor know much about it. Oh, and before I forget, the show looks beautiful. I love the painterly style. Usually, when people try to make 3D animation look painterly or like cell animation, it just looks weird and uncanny. But here it really works. I think they spared no expense on this show. It just looks amazing. I also think it is appropriate for the type of world they're trying to portray here. Everything looks a lot more dirty and lived in, and just a lot more interesting to look at. Normal 3D animation can tend to look very clean sometimes, which wouldn't work in this show. However, despite liking it overall, I definitely had some issues with the show, mostly to do with how much time it chooses to spend on certain things. There are some things that this show does not spend enough time on, and there are some things in this show that this show spends far too much time on. I'll explain what those are as I go through each episode. So, with spoilers ahead, here I go. Episode 1. So, going into the first episode, the series makes its first few good choices. Since it's been a long time since we've seen season 1, it's really important that they set the tone right, and this episode did that mostly well. I just had an issue with the choice to use modern sounding pop songs. This is an issue with the whole show. Despite the fact that the songs themselves are great and the artists that made them are very talented, it still took me out of the world when they were played. Because this is a unique sci fi fantasy world, I really enjoy the feeling of escaping to it. The style of most of these songs is very modern and very reminiscent of our modern lives, so it ends up taking me out of the world quite a bit. There were a few songs that fit in the scenes that they were used in. My favorite being the French one by the Papa Ute guy. I don't want to be an absolutist about this, there are definitely some scenes where the songs do work, but most of the time it messes up the immersion. So I personally would have really preferred if they stuck to the score for most of the show. I was not really that invested in the action sequence that took place in the first episode. I only care about a handful of characters in this show, so it's annoying whenever they waste time on other stuff. This was a huge problem in the first season as well, and it gets more apparent as this season progresses, so I'll talk more about it as we go ahead. Episode 2. Episode 2 was better. The action scenes were better because I cared about the characters in them, unlike the previous episode. I gotta say, the choreography or whatever it's called is really great. It's amazing that the hand to hand combat in an animated series is better than most live action stuff. A lot of the hand to hand combat felt really believable. Especially that scene in season 1 where it's just kids beating each other up bare knuckle. I like Jinx quite a bit as a character. I found her insecurities as a child and as an adult very relatable, and I was constantly rooting for her. It's amazing that they took this goofy ass thing from a game and made it something so great. I love it. I really like that in this season and the last there are plenty of scenes of her just hanging around. I like it when interesting characters are just shown during their downtime. I wish there was more of it, particularly in one point of the show where there really needed to be these types of scenes, but the show very impatiently rushed past it. But I'll talk about that when we get to it. The show builds up to the character interactions we've been waiting for since the end of season 1 very slowly, which is a good thing. It would have been bad if we just jump into episode 1 and straight away Jinx and Vi are fighting. I'm glad they're at least patient during this point of the show. Episode 3. This episode is the first time in this season that Jinx and Vi interact, which is exciting. Again, the action scenes involving characters that I actually care about are considerably better. I have some thoughts on the way Caitlyn's arc was executed this season. The issues with her character become more apparent as the show moves on. The scene where Isha saves Jinx is good, but I would have loved a bit more development of their relationship beforehand. I like the idea of introducing her character this season, and I feel a lot of the interactions between her and Jinx were really fun to watch. I just wish there was at least one of those interactions before this scene happens. The fight between Jinx and Vi was executed pretty well. I just wish they didn't splice in shots of what was going on with Jayce. And this brings me to the show's biggest weakness. The biggest weakness of the show is that I really didn't care about the science and arcane related stuff. It was always boring. This is a problem throughout the whole show. I really didn't care about Jace and Victor at all. Whenever they cut to those guys and all this crap, I was just waiting for them to go back to the other characters. It happened when Jinx and Vi were kids, and it's happening now. Some things never change, I guess. It's the same feeling as waiting for an ad break to end while watching TV. Remember that? Remember ad breaks? Remember TV? Anyway, the issue with a character like Jace is that he doesn't struggle at all. It's really hard to root for or care about a character that doesn't struggle, especially when contrasting him with characters like Vi and Jinx. You have these guys whose parents are dead and are constantly avoiding danger at every turn, who are at the risk of losing their only remaining father figure, and you cut to this guy who's super talented, he has plenty of people who care for him, and from that starting point only rises up even more. Everyone loves him, he's the most important guy, and oh, he just got granted political power. And oh, now he's dating the baddest bitch in the show. Like, he's the most boring character. After the time skip in season 1, you're super worried about Jinx and have no idea where Vi even is. Meanwhile, my guy is having a fucking cocktail party. Even a character like Caitlyn, who you could say is definitely privileged, is still interesting in season 1 because she still struggled in some way. And the fish out of water element is very well set up and executed as well. She was used really well for drama. Surely there are different types of struggle, and not all of it has to be as extreme at what these two have been through. And I'm not saying Jace should be removed from the show completely, he should just have significantly less screen time. He should probably show up for a 10-minute portion every 3 episodes or something. The politics is important for the world building for sure, but it should be in the background of the drama. It simply can't engage us as well as the character drama can. I was always curious about Vi and Jinx whenever we cut away from them, because those characters were struggling and I wanted to know what was going on with them. Whenever they cut away from Jace, I was never waiting for the show to return to him because I was sure he would be just fine. There was simply no tension or stakes surrounding that character. Even in season 2, when we see him all fucked up, especially in episode 7, the struggle is entirely physical. Despite the fact that the thing that he's dealing with is supposedly the most important thing in this universe, I just don't connect with it at all. I've never just called a character a Mary Sue because I feel like it's kind of an abused word that just gets to unfairly criticize movies. But Jace feels like a Mary Sue here. Again, every scene with Jace feels like an ad break, man. I was waiting for it to end so we could carry on with the real drama. Episode 4. Coming back to Caitlyn, she doesn't feel like a real person in this season. She just flip-flops between being a hateful monster and being a somewhat decent human every couple episodes. I could understand it if her character went in any one direction. I just don't get it when she alternates between both. For example, if she's going down a darker path where she is going closer to being an antagonist, the writers should commit to that because it doesn't make sense when she switches to Jinx team. Even if you wanted to make her an internally conflicted character who is morally uncertain, you can't have her changing her mind so suddenly without sufficient context. Let's take episode 3 where she abandons Vi because she wouldn't let her risk a kid's life. If your reasoning for her behavior here is that she's vengeful because her mother died, you need to explain why she's able to unite with her in episode 6. Did she just forget about her mom all of a sudden? Stuff like this just makes her less believable as a character. The Jack Toll lady character is a good villain though. She seems really menacing and threatening, which is what you need in this story. I wasn't super invested in her character, but that's okay because they didn't spend an obnoxious amount of time on it. I'm looking at you, Jayce. Her intro scene is my favorite. She just shows up at Piltover and the first thing she does is fuck some male prostitutes.
I'm off to sample the local cuisine.
I mean, what a great character. Anyway, first when we realized the beast is Vander, I was kind of annoyed that they were bringing back a dead character. But the show went in a direction I did not expect and honestly left me really confused and in disbelief when I first saw it. But we'll get to that in a bit. Episode 5. This was a very good episode. I was annoyed when we saw Jayce again. This crap is boring. The flashback we saw with Vander and Silco was very interesting, especially in context with season 1. We're given hints to Vander and Silco's past in season 1, but it's interesting to actually see a moment from it. It helps us get an understanding of the weight of their fallout. I have to say, I love Silco and Vander as characters. They're both characters that have had a lot of care put into them. I love the depth of both of them, and they both do feel very three dimensional. When they first show Silco, he seems like a generic bad guy, but it's cool to find out that there's more to him and more to why he does what he does. He is evil, but his motivations for being so are kind of believable. It was refreshing to see him almost take that deal from Jayce. He's not just like a war hungry maniac. I mean, he mostly is, but there is like a pragmatism to him. It's a similar thing with Vander as well. It's interesting to see that he too has done morally questionable things in the past. Honestly, I was surprised to find out that these were characters that don't exist in the game because they were really great. Again, I'm glad I've never played the game because Vander and Silco dying in season 1 was just as surprising to me as it would have been if Caitlyn or Jayce died. Because I didn't know who was from the game and who wasn't. God, now I'm just fantasizing about Jayce dying. This season managed to make previous characters relevant in a pretty interesting way. In a way that made them seem less like throwaway characters that were just created for the sole purpose of dying. This really emphasizes how much care was really put into this show. I guess there's more of this in episode 7. The interactions between Jinx and Vi were very good this episode. I loved every second of screen time with both of those characters. And Isha. The show is great when it focuses on these characters. The arcane and politics related stuff is very boring. They should have significantly cut down the screen time of a lot of the other stuff and just focused on this. I felt at this point that the villains are very promising. I overall like the villains of this season. I would say that Silco as a villain in the first season was definitely more interesting, but what Jacked Old Lady lacked in character, she made up for in intimidation factor. Episode 6. Jacked Old Lady is cool as always.
Vi, you've been quite a curiosity.
This brings us to our sponsor, Curiosity Stream. I'm just kidding. This episode was when I reached the peak in terms of how hooked I was in this show. We root for Vander to be cured, but that is taking a toll on the healing powers of Victor. And in the meantime, the villains have their own reason to stop Vander from being cured. Everything comes together very nicely. Again, I wish Caitlyn was a better character. It didn't make no sense why she switched sides here. Actually, I don't know why I'm talking about this because there's something far more important to talk about. The ending of this episode left me very confused. That was my initial reaction. It did not go the way I thought it would, and honestly, I respect the show for being so bold. I do think it was a good choice to take the show in this direction. This is a pretty dark show, and I think it's important that the writers make these types of choices at regular intervals to show the audience that they really mean business. It didn't feel like a random thing they did just to prove the audience how edgy they were. It felt like something that really needed to be done to maintain the show's tone. And it's important that the low point of the show feels super low. However, despite all of this being well done, the issues arise in the following few episodes. The show moves on from Isha's death far too quickly. We need to see Jinx dealing with it for at least some time. There are particular boxes that need to be ticked for the full emotional potential of a death to be reached. Honestly, episode 7 aside, and I'll talk about episode 7, the show is too fast paced. We've just now reached the low point of the season. We are all fully invested in the characters. Here there's some juicy character interactions that could happen, but they just breeze past them. Anyway, it's time for episode 7 now. Episode 7. Initially, it was feeling like a filler episode, and I do feel it's a lot longer than it needs to be. However, it went on to become one of the best episodes of the series. It was very interesting to see what could have been. We see everyone, even minor characters like Vegeta the Hedgehog. If you remember, he and Jinx didn't even like each other in the beginning of the first season. His character at the time was a huge source of insecurity for Jinx. He was kind of an asshole. To see them having become friends here recontextualizes those interactions into just childish arguments. This is a reality where Jinx doesn't even know how to fight and is just a normal person. If anything, this portion of the story alone justifies the arcane magic stuff being included in the story. I mean, I still think they spent far too much time on it, but I'll give it that. It was good for something. This episode really adds a bit more depth to the first season as well. I rewatched the first season to see how it feels now, and it was even better than the first time. I especially feel that Echo's character developed in a way that was very interesting. Until now, he was a character I didn't care about as much, but for this story, he was the perfect viewpoint character. Seeing him become more optimistic and regaining his faith in Jinx was really cool. I like the way that his moment of realization was executed. It's super cool, and the song, I mentioned it earlier, but it's my favorite one this season. Now he knows, and is the only one who knows for sure that a good reality is possible. Which is kind of the flaw with a lot of the other characters. They just aren't even trying for a better world. I guess I have to admit the contrast of Jayce going and witnessing how much worse it could be is pretty cool as well. I still wish they didn't spend as much time on him, but it was important. At this point, I was rooting for Echo quite a bit and was really excited to see how his interactions with Jinx would go in the main timeline. And I have to say, I was very disappointed. Despite this episode being amazing, I have to say that the show completely wasted all the potential built up with it. Echo has a very unique perspective compared to the other characters because he's the only character that knows for a fact that a good reality is possible. I mean, Jinx herself doesn't believe she can be happy. So, what I really needed was to see Echo interact with these other characters because those interactions had the potential to be so interesting. Anyway, I'll talk about that in the next episode, episode 8.
With that shifty, self-serving war pig. She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it. I know!
Okay, so is it just me or is that a cringe line? Wait. You know what? Let's just cut to the chase. When Caitlyn fucked Vi, my first thought was to feel bad for Maddie for being cheated on. But of course, fortunately for Caitlyn, Maddie turned out to be a bad guy, so now she doesn't need to worry about her moral wrongdoings.
I did appreciate your warmth.
When you set something up like this, I expect some drama to follow up, some kind of confrontation leading to Caitlyn having to deal with her guilt or something. I know it sounds like a soap opera, but that's what the show needed at this point, especially after everything Caitlyn has done. The payoff and the ending that we got for Maddie was something that felt more like an excuse to escape drama and to avoid it and to move on to the next thing. Honestly, it feels super awkward that Caitlyn doesn't have to deal with the guilt of her decisions and just gets to enjoy being with Vi now. It just doesn't feel narratively satisfying. And to sum it up, the Scottish betrayal was annoying. Episode 9. The scene where Echo saves Jinx was very rushed. We need a lot more build up to the point where Jinx tries to Minecraft herself. We need to see Echo urgently and desperately searching for her when he realizes what she's trying to do. His expression should be a lot more extreme and it should be focused on a lot more, especially now that he has a romantic connection with her. But instead, it's just kind of rushed past. Instead, we have to see this guy's face. Honestly, Echo could have had good interactions with many of the characters because of his unique perspective. I mean, where's his interaction with Jayce? The one Jayce scene I actually want to see, and they didn't even make it. This show often leaves me filling in emotional gaps that I crave, while fucking waterboarding me with long drawn out conversations that I'm not even interested in. The ending left me feeling very mixed. I did not expect this series to be so out there. Jinx dying was the last thing I ever expected to happen. Again, I'll commend the writers for going there at all. But that being said, I don't think that it was executed in the best way at all. I was really rooting for Echo and Jinx to interact more. Even if they don't all out get together in a traditional happy ending, and they just didn't do anything with that. I'm okay with a sad ending, even though I naturally root for a happy one. The issue was that this particular sad ending didn't feel like it reached its full emotional potential. If the main characters had a few more interactions with each other after the low point was established but before the climax, it could have been so much more interesting. I want to see Jinx go to the Firelight's base and have a few scenes where she makes up with Echo. We probably needed a flashback of them together as kids as well. I really like the scene in season 1 where they show them playing as kids and reflect that with them fighting in the present. We needed a reminder that they played as kids at this point in the show as well, in another flashback or something, because there aren't really any scenes with Jinx and Echo as kids. I want to see Jinx grieving Isha for at least some time. Maybe talk about her to Echo or something. We need stuff like this for the ending to feel satisfying and justified. whatever the ending ends up being. People are speculating that Jinx might still be alive, and of course, the hint in the end was very compelling. It seems like the creators are just going to observe the reaction, see how the audience responds, and accordingly decide whether or not to bring her back, which is annoying. A fake death? What is this fucking One Piece? I feel like this show in general wastes too much time on uninteresting things when there are interesting things that it could be focusing on instead. I don't give a fuck if the magic, whatever happens. Despite the fact that it will literally kill everyone, it was still the least interesting thing in the whole show. The scenes that they could have made of Echo and Jinx planning their attack and interacting is so much more interesting than Mel and her mom or Jayce and Victor. I feel like this show kind of doesn't realize what's so good about it. I wouldn't complain this much if the storyline was extended to a third season, because then I would be expecting more stuff in the future, especially from Echo. But since the character arcs are mostly wrapped up here, I feel like it's really highlighted how much potential this show wasted. Because now, even if Jinx did come back, there's no conflict to engage us with. Conclusion. Anyway, I don't want my endless complaining to make it seem like I hate the show. I do think it's one of the better shows released in the past few years, and I do think that the people that made it put a lot of care into it. So I would definitely recommend it, especially the first 3 episodes of the first season. I mean, that bit alone is a masterpiece. So my current rating for the show is like an 8 out of 10. Anyway, thanks for watching my dumb video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. See you later.